When a devastating flood destroys CEO Toan's construction site, his world begins to crumble. Yet, he hides the truth from his wife, Tu Diem, to protect her peace and their unborn child. Behind his calm smile lies sleepless nights, buried debts, and silent pain. But through love, sacrifice, and quiet strength, Toan fights to keep their dream alive.
The heavy rain had poured for days without rest, turning the gentle rivers into roaring beasts. When the flood finally came, it was merciless, sweeping through valleys, toppling hillsides, and devouring everything in its path. Toan stood on the muddy construction site, his clothes drenched, his heart sinking as he watched the chaos unfold before his eyes. The landslide came like thunder, breaking the fragile line between man and nature. Concrete pillars that had once stood tall and proud were now half buried under layers of thick earth. Machines worth millions lay twisted and broken, swallowed by the relentless mud. For years, Toan had poured his soul into this project, the company's biggest and most ambitious one yet. It was supposed to be a symbol of growth, a future built on his vision and perseverance. But now, all that remained was destruction. As the rain continued to fall, he could almost hear the sound of loss echoing through the wind, the collapse of trust, the weight of debt, the whispers of doubt from those who had once believed in him. The next morning, reports began flooding in from every direction. Investors called, their voices sharp and demanding, asking for compensation, demanding answers. Some accused him of negligence, others simply wanted their money back. Toan sat in his office, the phone ringing endlessly, but his hands trembled too much to pick it up. The damage assessment came in. The numbers were staggering. Millions gone, deadlines broken, reputation at stake. For a man who had built his empire with careful calculation and unshakable will, this blow was devastating. Yet Toan didn't allow himself to collapse. He walked through the ruins of the site with quiet determination, checking on the workers, offering words of comfort, even as his own heart bled. He knew they looked to him for hope, and he couldn't let them see his fear. The muddy ground sucked at his boots with every step, but he kept walking, his gaze steady, his mind racing with plans. There had to be a way out, a path forward even in this storm. That night, when the rain finally stopped, Toan stood alone under the dim light of the construction sign. The logo of his company, once glowing bright, now flickered weakly in the mist. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, the smell of wet earth heavy in the air. He thought of Tu Diem waiting at home, her smile, her gentle voice. He couldn't let her see this side of him, the broken, exhausted man who feared losing everything. No, tomorrow he would smile as if nothing had happened. Tomorrow, he would be strong again. For her, for their family, and for the dream he refused to let die.
The next morning, Toan returned home with the same quiet grace he always carried. The scent of warm porridge and jasmine tea filled the air as sunlight filtered softly through the curtains. Tu Diem was in the kitchen, her gentle hum blending with the sound of boiling water. When she turned and smiled at him, something inside Toan ached. That pure, trusting smile was the one thing he couldn't afford to shatter. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, her tone light, full of tenderness. "I did," Toan replied with a practiced smile, walking over to help her set the table. He moved carefully, as if afraid that one wrong word or gesture would cause the fragile peace around them to crumble. She didn't know that he had been awake all night, staring at spreadsheets and contracts, his mind calculating losses and strategies while his heart grew heavier with each passing hour. As they sat down for breakfast, Diem chatted cheerfully about the baby, how she'd felt a soft kick last night, how she dreamed the child would have his eyes. Toan listened, nodding, smiling at the right moments, even laughing when she teased him about being a strict father. Yet deep down, his thoughts were far away, on the ruined construction site, on the relentless investors, on the workers who might soon lose their jobs. Every word she spoke felt like a melody that soothed his soul, but also reminded him of how much he had to protect. After breakfast, Toan kissed her forehead and promised to come home early. The moment he stepped outside, his expression hardened again, his posture straightened, the mask of the CEO replacing that of the loving husband. The contrast between the two worlds was cruel. In the office, he was bombarded with calls, meetings, and accusations. He signed documents, negotiated with lawyers, and tried to salvage what he could. But at times, he refused to let that darkness follow him. Each night when he returned, he made sure to bring small gifts, a bouquet of lilies, her favorite fruit, or simply her favorite dessert from the bakery down the street. Diem would light up like a child, her laughter filling the house, and for a moment, Toan could almost forget the weight he carried. They would eat together, watch the sunset, talk about baby names, and dream about the future, a future he wasn't sure he could still afford, yet one he was determined to fight for. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, Diem would rest her head on his chest and whisper, "You seem tired lately. Are you okay?" Toan would smile, brush her hair gently, and whisper back, "Just work, love. Nothing to worry about." She would nod, trusting him completely, and drift off to sleep. And there, in the darkness, Toan would stare at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing, and silently vow to endure it all, the losses, the fear, the sleepless nights, as long as it meant keeping her peace untouched.
Days turned into weeks, and the chaos outside seemed endless. Yet inside their home, everything remained calm, almost too calm, like a fragile dream that might dissolve with the slightest tremor. Toan kept up the illusion masterfully. Every morning, he left with a kiss on Tu Diem's forehead, pretending to be the same confident man he'd always been. Every evening, he returned with that same warm smile, hiding behind it the exhaustion etched deep beneath his eyes. He wanted her world to stay untouched by the storm raging through his. Sometimes, he would stand by the nursery, staring at the tiny crib they had bought together. It was painted white, with little clouds along the edges, and Diem had placed a soft blue blanket inside. "For when our baby arrives," she had said, her eyes sparkling. Toan's chest tightened every time he looked at it. That small crib represented everything he was fighting for, the life they had dreamed of, the promise of safety and love. Even if the company fell apart, even if his name lost its worth, he would never let that dream collapse. Late at night, when the house was silent, Toan often sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. The world outside seemed cold and unforgiving, but in this small home, there was warmth. The laughter of Diem, the faint rhythm of their baby's heartbeat, the scent of jasmine tea she loved so much. He clung to those little moments like lifelines. They were what kept him from breaking completely. One evening, Diem surprised him with dinner on the balcony. Candles flickered softly in the breeze, and her face glowed in the golden light. "You've been working so hard," she said, her hand finding his. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself too." Toan's throat tightened, his chest heavy with words he couldn't say. He wanted to tell her everything, the debts, the broken contracts, the fear that haunted him every second. But instead, he smiled and squeezed her hand. "I promise," he whispered. That night, after she had fallen asleep, Toan lay beside her, listening to her breathing, slow, calm, peaceful. His hand rested on her belly, feeling the faint movement of their child. A surge of emotion washed over him, love, fear, hope, and a fierce determination. He realized that no matter how dark things became, he could endure it all for them,
For her smile, for their child's future, for the family he was building with his own trembling hands. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain again, whispering of another storm. But Toan didn't flinch this time. He closed his eyes, kissed Diem's forehead gently, and murmured to himself, "Whatever comes, I'll protect them. Even if the world falls apart, I'll find a way to stand." And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe, not in luck, not in business, but in love strong enough to outlast any storm.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tu Diem Review. Rất vui vì ngày hôm nay lại được gặp lại các bạn trong tập phim ngày hôm nay. Trong câu chuyện của tập phim chúng ta hôm nay đã kể về việc là CEO Toan đang gặp khó khăn trong kinh tế. Đó là công ty của anh đứng trước nguy cơ phải phá sản do trận lũ lụt vừa rồi gây ra sạt lở các công trình mà công ty anh đang thi công. Điều đó khiến cho anh đang rất là đau đầu. Anh và chị Thúy đang tìm mọi cách để gỡ rối về vấn đề tài chính cho công ty, nhưng anh đã giấu Lý Tu Diem để cho cô không phải lo lắng về vấn đề này. Anh vẫn tỏ ra rất là vui vẻ và bình thường, hàng ngày vẫn về trò chuyện và ăn cơm tối cùng cô. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn sẽ còn được kể ở video tiếp theo. Các bạn nếu thấy video hôm nay hay, hấp dẫn thì hãy bấm vào nút like and share and comment dưới video giúp mình nhé. Đặc biệt hãy ấn vào nút subscribe để đăng ký kênh, nhận được tập phim mới nhất sẽ được thông báo trên kênh. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Bye bye.